Okay guys, we are back in action. Welcome back to the Dirty Desk Pad. So, for those of you who do not know, this is a mini PC that I bought by mistake a month or two ago. And I was very surprised by how well it performed, considering that it's just a Ryzen 3200GE. It is a low wattage version of the 3200G. And it actually performed half decently considering how cheap of a processor it is. Well, I have a plan for this today. So, I jumped on AliExpress and I bought this. And we're going to do some stuff with it. So for starters, I already tore this down because I used the hard drives in the other mini PC video, so those have all been pulled out. Now, I'm going to steal the processor out of it. That is some very dry thermal paste. But now, of course, these CPUs have pins on them, so you got to be super careful with them. Make sure not to bend any pins. We're going to put this up on the shelf facing with the pins up. And that's all we're taking out of this. So next up, we have a B350i. Now, I went with a B350 because this processor and the processor that's going to end up in this system when I'm done does not support anything more than Gen 3 PCIe. So, why waste the extra money? I was able to get this off AliExpress for 60 bucks. So, pretty decent deal. And the box, all it comes with is a SATA cable and an I/O shield. So we're going to drop that CPU right in, just like that. See if I have some thermal paste here. No, I have some somewhere. Okay, we have the same stuff that we used last time, so I'm not going to bother with wiping this off. And it would appear that we are now out of thermal paste from that tube. So, for a cooler, I just have the stock AMD cooler that I've taken the shroud off of. Basically, you just pull up on the shroud on each side, and it'll pop off. And we're going to use this guy. Now, I like to tuck this wire underneath. Just make sure that it's not getting pinched. And just like that, we have a cooler on. Now, for storage, don't support Crucial. Micron sucks, but it's what I have. This is my game drive from the last two PCs that we're just going to use. Now we're going to connect the CPU to one of these 4-pin headers. They're not labeled. So I don't know if this one in particular is meant for the CPU, but it's the one we're going to use. Now next up, the other thing that's super expensive, RAM. I picked this up off Facebook Marketplace. It's a 32 gigabyte kit, 3200 mega transfers per second with some kind of latency. These were 120 bucks. I have a similar set to these, and these are very finicky. So bear that in mind. I wouldn't recommend using this kit of XPG. But again, just because brand new RAM is expensive does not mean that used RAM is going to be expensive. You just got to keep your eye out and shop for the deals. I see on eBay all the time, 300 bucks for 32 gigs of DDR5. 32 gigs of DDR4, you can get for 150 to 200 no problem used. And brand new, you can get a 16 gigabyte kit all day, every day, if you know where to look. Now, you don't need 32 gigs for this. You will see during the benchmarking, this is overkill, but we'll get to that when we get to that. I need to power this. Well, normally I would reveal the case first, but the way I'm powering this is unconventional. We're using a Pico PSU. It's just a tiny little motherboard. Now these usually offer about 100 watts to 150. I believe this one claims to be 160, but well, let's just say I wouldn't push that. So we need our 24 pin. We need our 8 pin for our CPU. And you can actually remove this SATA connector, but I'm going to hold on to it for now. You'll see why in a little bit. So next up, what are we putting this in? This is a 3D printed case that I built myself, designed myself. Because I'm trying to make this as absolutely small as possible. Why? For the next project that's going in here. So we're going to start off with our I/O shield in there. This is also my second iteration. The first one didn't quite line up properly. And then we're going to stick these guys in. And if everything lines up properly, we got our 4 bolt holes. Now, these are a pain in the butt, because I need to use a washer, and then I need to use a bolt. Reason I left these guys on is because we're going to use that SATA cable that they gave us. And I'm actually going to boot off of a SATA drive. I just have this drive set up from the CPU to begin with. So I figure, why not just reuse it? Of course, it would be a lot cleaner to not, but oh well. And we're just going to tuck him somewhere in here. I actually kind of didn't think about putting this inside of the case. That's ugly. I'll figure that out in a moment. I made a hole in the back of here for this port. It doesn't stick out far enough for the nut to go on the back. So once this gets into its final stage, I will be figuring something out to hold that in place, but for now, it's just going to be kind of loose. My original design for the lid for this was this guy. It's going to show off the RGB RAM, and then have a RAM to kind of force air onto the fan. Well, unfortunately, I completely screwed up the measurements, but that's okay, because at the end of the day I found out that if you actually add a little something extra to this, aka another fan, you can overclock the crap out of the CPU. So I need to add the front header. Okay, so my mounting holes didn't line up perfectly. I kind of screwed up drilling those, but you get the idea. It is mounted. Now the big hole in the top, what's that for? Well, we're going to take this, which was kind of a grindy sounding fan, and we're going to make it less grindy sounding. We're just going to take this guy, the blades themselves, some silicone compound, which is just dielectric grease, and we're just going to grease it up. So get some on the shaft, then on the magnet, then we're just going to push that back on. Just like that. And now she doesn't sound so grindy. So I do have spots to screw this in on the top, but the fitment is so perfect that you don't really need to. In fact, the fitment is so perfect that it doesn't slide down all the way, but that's okay. I will do some sanding later, and we will deal with that. So this is an RGB fan, but I don't see any RGB. Is that an RGB header? That is an RGB header, I think. Yep, that is RGB. So why not? Let's make it obnoxious. We'll toss the RGB header there. Now this power button and everything came off of an NZXT H1, the stupid Xbox looking case. I had one and then I stripped it for parts because it sucked. And we're going to plug in our front USB. This actually does have USB-C on the motherboard. So plug that in. Our HD audio is over here. And then front panel header, all one piece. Love to see it. More manufacturers need to start doing that. And then just like that, we kind of tuck all the wires out of the way. And just like that, we have ourselves a little PC. Now for the power supply, I just have one of these 12-volt power supplies. I took the plug out of this other one that was not made for 120 and attached it onto here so that I can put 120 in and disconnect it. These are not the safest, so it would be recommended to find a 150 watt power supply on Amazon that doesn't require you to use one of these. That being said, it's what I have right now. 5.5 by 2.5 plug. Give it a second. Okay, guys, turns out that I blew up that little power supply, so that's why it wouldn't turn on. Anyway, we're gonna jump into here. Set our XMPs. And I did a little bit of testing yesterday. And we can get the CPU stably at 4,000 with a CPU voltage of 1400 millivolts. And then the iGPU was quite happy at 1620 with 1300 millivolts. I also have no idea where to allocate more memory to the GPU, so I couldn't do that. But anyways, so just to start off, we'll jump into Task Manager here. And you can see the last time that we were jumping into here, we were pegged at 100%. We are now not idling at 100%. We can see our 4 gigahertz at 4 cores and 4 threads. Our GPU has 2 gigabytes dedicated, and then it shares 15. I don't know if it'll actually pull from that or not. Then we can see our 3200 mega transfers. Let's start off with The Witcher 3. Okay, I just set it back up to the max fan setting, and I took my SATA drive and just stuck it outside of the case for the time being, because it was blocking my ventilation. I kind of didn't think that one through all the way. So I think with this particular cooler, we are locked to keeping this around 65 watts. Which makes sense. That's what that cooler is rated for. So, try to downclock a little bit more. And we'll go for 1540 at 1220. Alright, let's see where that brings our wattage. Okay, it looks like we are sitting at that 65 to 67 watt range. So we're just gonna run around here and see what temperatures get. But at this point we are stable. And again, we're playing at 1080p low at 30 frames per second. Consistent.
Left side.
And sharpening out the high. And just like this, I mean, totally playable at 30 frames per second. You have to play this with a controller. Do not play it with a mouse and keyboard. It will feel terrible. But this is totally playable, which is absolutely hilarious. This is performing as well as the 5600G did in the Lenovo Mini PC. Okay, well, with that out of the way, let's jump into a couple of other games and try them out. Well, at medium we are not getting 60 frames per second, but we're over 30. And honestly, as far as input latency and everything, this feels totally fine. Again, you're basically getting an Xbox 360 experience. And look at that, we have the GPU maxed out. Of course, older games are going to use less of the CPU and be more reliant on the GPU. And we are not getting 60. In fact, we're not actually, we didn't gain very much from dropping. Oh, no, I can feel a pretty big difference. This does feel considerably better. And it looks considerably better. This is like when you own a Xbox One and then you plugged it into a 120Hz TV and all of a sudden unlocked 60 frames per second. That's how this feels. Let's just go fight some enemies to see what it does. That was not who I was aiming at, but okay. Interesting too that it keeps jumping between 16 and 33 milliseconds. It feels much closer to that 16. I think it just doesn't know how to report anything other than 60 and 30 frames per second, to be honest. But yeah, honestly, this feels really good playing like this.
Never should have come here.
Ooh, and we got one of those. This is the special edition. If you were to play the original edition, you'd definitely be getting 60 frames per second all day, every day. Next game. And sharpening at 0.3, and yeah, we got 35 frames per second. So, now my question is, what does it feel like in game? I don't know what happened between Cyberpunk and everything else, but Cyberpunk, the audio quality was just absolutely horrible, so I had to voice over it after the fact. Now, to start with, I tried playing at 900p. I did the benchmark there at 900p, and the benchmark was promising, but as soon as I jumped into the game, well, the reality is this processor just is not powerful enough for this game. The graphics on the processor are fine. The GPU can totally handle it, but the processor itself just gets hit way too hard with everything going on. That being said, if you were stuck in a position where your choice was not playing Cyberpunk or playing it this way, I would choose playing it this way. It wasn't completely and utterly broken. It was bouncing off of that 40 frame per second mark, which does get to the point where it kind of feels playable. That 40 frames per second in Cyberpunk is where the frame pacing starts to normal out. Anything below that, and it's just relatively unplayable. Anything bouncing around the 30 point, you just get stutters like crazy. Obviously in this back alley, you got lots and lots of frames. Now I did drop it down to 720p at this point. You can see there I was still at 900p, but it just... as soon as we walked out onto the street, I could feel how bad it felt. And you can see here we are hitting around that 40 frames per second, like I was saying. In the original Lenovo PC, it was completely unplayable. Here, it is almost playable, is what I would label it as. There really isn't that much further to go with it. Unfortunately, going down to balanced FSR is just transferring a lot of the load onto the CPU. You could try turning down the voltage on the GPU, leaving it at stock clocks, and then overclocking the processor more, but I don't think you're going to get where you need it to be. And driving around, it did definitely feel like it was playing at 30 frames per second. Oh boy, we are in the base, which is a very CPU reliant part of the game. And it's not going well. Where is my door? I need to get out of there. Okay. Again, the amount of pals in my base is based on a Ryzen 7 7800X30. The amount of pals that you can put in your base is an option, and you're definitely going to need to turn that down if you're playing on the CPU. This actually is the smoothest I've felt it yet on an APU, including the Z1 Extreme. Now, mind you, I've only ever used mobile versions of the newer APUs, so laptop variants. This game is actually kind of playable right now. Doesn't look great, like I said. If this is your only option, this is totally doable. In fact, I kind of forgot that I was benchmarking there for a minute, and I was just kind of having fun with chests. The wattage does seem higher than before, though, which is interesting. Kind of looks like the GPU is pulling us up into that higher wattage this time. Temps are all over the place. Now, I'm not sure what's going on with the echoing sound at all, but whatever. Moving past that, this is actually the most playable I've ever been able to experience this game on an APU, including the 780M graphics. Mind you, I've only ever used the mobile variants of the 780M graphics, but if I was in a pinch, if I was a kid and I wanted to play this with my friends, I could get away with this. Honestly, you turn down the amount of pals loading into the world, and this would be completely playable. Is it an absolutely phenomenal experience that I would recommend everybody try? No. But if you're in a pinch, if you can't afford a computer right now, if this is all that you have, you'll be able to get away with this. Anyways, guys, next game. Now, surprisingly, in Battlefield 6, it was actually more playable on the Lenovo Mini PC than it is on this overclocked system. I don't know what's going on. I tried turning the settings down to the same as what they were when I was playing on the Mini PC. Did not make a difference. It was just not as smooth as it was when it was on that Mini PC. I found that turning the render resolution down made absolutely no difference because, again, we were limited by the CPU here, not the GPU. And trying to put that load onto the CPU when the CPU is maxed out doesn't do anything. You can still see, though, that the CPU is not showing 100% in a lot of this game. I don't know what's going on with that, but overall it was not an overly enjoyable experience. I played around with the sniper a little bit. At least I could see what I was doing here. But the stuttering and the hitching just was not great. I'm almost wondering if it was not happy with having too much RAM. If there was too much stuff loading in and the processor just could not manage everything that was loaded into the RAM. That's a possibility, considering that even the RX 5600G was more smooth than this was. Ooh, big drop there. Now, obviously, nothing changes the fact that I'm bad at this game. Nothing is going to change the fact that I'm bad at this game. The gameplay is always going to be bad whenever you see me playing Battlefield. But, is what it is. This is also only the second time I've ever played this map. Originally, I thought maybe this map was the issue, but we ended up loading into the same map as we played before, which you'll see in a little bit here, and we still had the issue with this really inconsistent frame pacing. Looking at that frame time graph, you'd see it's just all over the place. There's no consistency whatsoever. This is also another one of those situations where just sniper rifles are not going to happen. And again, I don't recommend this CPU for this kind of game anyways. But it would have been nice if it could at least play it relatively playably. Especially considering that we do have a pretty decent overclock on it, and everything else has been playing so well comparably. The last one on. Here we are, jumping into the same map that we were playing last time. I did switch over to an SMG just when you are having frame pacing issues. Sniper rifles are not your friend. And you can see the frame pacing is just, it's not there. It's not there. I would almost consider keeping a second profile where it drops this back down to stock settings and go with that. And considering that usually when you drop now, Fortnite was actually kind of hilarious. When I originally tried to play it, I think I was not clicked on to the actual game, and it was locked at 30 frames per second. The 30 frames per second was incredibly smooth, but I was like, why am I stuck at this locked frame rate? So I was wondering if it was an issue with the legacy mode, switched back over to performance mode, non-legacy, and this happened. Nothing was loading in properly. You can see that that wall had no textures. There were chests that just didn't exist. Now that I'm looking at it, I could see that it was there. It just, because it had no textures, I could not find it. There's another chest there that, again, just hid in with the wall. And when you're playing at this reduced image rate, it's really hard to see that, you know, hey, that item just doesn't have any textures. It's still there. What I do find interesting is that this goes to show why there are all those frame drops when you first install this game onto a PC, and the first time that, or sometimes even the second time that you drop in, you get this really big stutter. That's funny. And it kind of clears up after the second or third game. This seems to be showing that. Now, jumping into another game, you can see that textures have kind of loaded in now. So I think that's kind of cool that it shows, you know, why we're getting those huge frame drops when we first start matches in Fortnite. That being said, everybody still had the same skin, which was kind of weird. And although the frame rate was pretty high here, it was still really hitchy and stuttery. I wouldn't call this playable. I definitely would not be playing this game on normal performance. I would definitely be running on Legacy. But the input is very smooth. You can see this guy just kind of comes up and ruins my life. Now, I do believe, though, that running at 50% render scale on Legacy performance and locking it to 60 frames per second, you can play this. And it's going to feel fine. If you look at that frame graph at this point, those are the settings that we're at. And it's consistent. I mean, a bad gamer like me isn't going to help much. And you can see the spiking on the frame time graph. Locking it down to 60 is really going to help with that. Okay, guys, so what are my final thoughts on my 3D printed Mini-ITX 3200GE PC? Overclocked like crazy. I am continuing to be genuinely impressed by the performance out of this CPU. This performed about as well as a 5600GE, which is actually kind of impressive considering that the 5600GE is 2 generations newer and has a completely different APU. The Vega 7 graphics, although having less cores, clock way higher. It has way more cores in the processor. I mean, all around, it should be a better APU, even if it's running at the 35 watts, but this was very close in performance to that, which I'm genuinely impressed. Obviously, with a stock cooler, we're going to be limited to the 65 watt TDP. As soon as you go over 65 watts, you start climbing in temperature and you end up thermal throttling. And that is a pain in the butt to tune your overclock to, because it almost breaks down to you're going to have to tune it for every game that you're trying to play with it. It's very goofy, but I see that there is a ton of potential for overclocking in this thing. I am limited by that stock cooler, and I do have a liquid cooler that would fit on this. So let me know in the comments if you want to see me toss a 280 AIO on this and overclock as much as possible. Now, one more thing. I don't know if you've noticed the lettering on my computer here. I am actually rebranding. By the time that you're watching this, you might have already noticed that the name on my profile has changed. I find that I'm not really focusing on the gaming aspect of things anymore, and I am more focused on the building aspect, and that's kind of the side that I'm really enjoying, and it seems to be the side that you guys are enjoying as well. So I have rebranded to Hillbilly Engineering, and yes, there is an extra G in engineering to make it engineering. I wonder where I got that from. This is not the end of this whole system. I'm continuing to develop this to eventually build a use case that I have for it. But you guys get to come along for each step of the way. Who would I recommend this to? Well, if you can only afford to grab one of these 3200GE mini PCs and build your way up, I mean, I guess it's a starting point. It will get you gaming. If you can get one of the Lenovo mini PCs for 100 to 150 Canadian dollars taxed and shipped to your door, this is the next logical step. Grab yourself a ITX motherboard, grab yourself some desktop RAM, and some kind of power supply, and you're into an AM4 platform without having to buy a GPU or a CPU, and then you can start saving for GPU as your next step. But going up to a higher speed APU is an option. The only thing that you have to keep in mind is that if you're sticking with these APUs, you are going to be limited to Gen 3 support for your PCIe lanes, which means that you're going to be limited on the cards that you can go up to. But like I said, this isn't the end for this guy. We're going to keep going and developing and see where we end up. Now, one last thing. That 200 watt, I think it was actually 250 watt, silver power supply that I got off of Amazon would not supply a steady 12 volts. As soon as you tried to turn on the PC, it would just shut off. That's why you were seeing that at the beginning when it would just kind of whenever I tried to turn it on. My workaround for that was I took the wire, this 5.5 by 2.5 barrel jack, and I just soldered it onto a CPU extension. And then I connected this onto a 500 watt power supply that had 33 amps on the 12 volt rail, and just used this tester jumper. You can get these on Amazon for a couple of bucks in order to turn on that power supply. I wouldn't recommend going that route, but yeah, no, I just wouldn't recommend going that route. That is a really stupid way to use a Pico PSU. Go on Amazon and find a 150 watt power brick. They're like 30 bucks. It just, with where I live, it never works out. I would have had to wait longer, and I am already way behind on this video. This video needs to be out on Wednesday. Today's Monday, and I have a ton of footage to edit through. So, there's that. Anyways, guys, I hope you liked the video. Next week, we should be back in the garage, hopefully. And the week after that, I'll be continuing on with this project. If you're interested in checking both those out, like, comment, and subscribe. Make sure to hit the notification bell so that you get notified when a new video gets posted. We grew like crazy this week again. Another, I think it was 10 or 15 subscribers. I was going to be all excited that I had 90 subscribers for this video, but then somebody unsubscribed from me today. So, thanks to that one person. You hurt my feelings. Anyways, guys, I love y'all. Y'all beautiful. Hope you had a great day. If you have any video suggestions, if you have anything you want me to check out, either APU-wise, computer-wise, or F-150-wise, leave it in the comments if it's something that I can do. And it sounds like a good idea. I'll make sure to shout you out. Okay, bye!